Hello, my name is Pat Ormsby, and I will be sharing the empathy research that I conducted to explore how we might motivate young adults to get involved in animal welfare as we continue our fight for all animals. From cats to dogs, wolves to bears, and giraffes to pangolins, we as a society love animals. And so the problem space that I identified was that the Humane Society of the United States struggles to appeal to young adults and receive financial support from them. And I asked the question, how might the HSUS reach young adults and inspire them to support the organization in ways that align with their capacity to give? While I recognize this problem space through the work that I do every single day as a graphic designer at the Humane Society of the United States, I explored more evidence to back what I already knew to be true. The first piece of work that I looked at was a book called Loving Animals: Toward a New Animal Advocacy by author Kathy Rudy. One of the interesting points that she brings up in her book is the idea of an animal advocate is very hard to define because everybody can bring their own interpretation to the meaning. In a similar vein, she brings up the idea that sometimes people don't recognize that they might be a supporter of feminism, but they have preconceived notions in their mind of what it means. She brings this back around to the idea of an animal advocate, suggesting that those that support overall animal liberation are animal advocates. It is not required to have such extreme views to consider yourself an animal advocate. Next, I looked at a piece called Social and Moral Values: Individual and Societal Perspectives. One of the main points that this piece brings up is that younger people are identifying with a form of activism called pro-social activism, which is a altruistic type of change. Instead of identifying individuals that need to change, they identify overall systems that need to change. And as a part of this, people identify themselves and recognize their place of privilege and use that privilege to help others and improve society and the systems. Another piece entitled Critical Animal and Media Studies takes a bit more of an extreme look at animal welfare and advocacy. The piece identifies that individuals all have some sort of respect for animals. However, the range of respect may vary. Some people may be compassionate pet owners, some people may be vegetarian, vegan, or pescatarian. Some individuals may purchase exclusively cruelty-free products, and many, many more people may lie somewhere else on the spectrum. The piece also identifies that the way our society discusses humans and non-humans differently creates a type of cognitive dissonance around how the concept of life is valued. Finally, I looked at an article entitled Young Adult Volunteers: Recruitment, Appeals, and Other Marketing Considerations. This piece identifies that right now, the idea of volunteering one's time, talent, or treasure is experiencing a revolution as a new generation reach adulthood. They have different characteristics and wants and needs than the generation before them, and it is important for non-for-profits to realize that their motivations are different and take the time to understand them. For my empathy research in exploring how might the HSUS reach a younger group of adults and inspire them to get involved in a way that aligns with their capacity to give, I identified two groups of stakeholders. I may have had the opportunity to explore more stakeholder groups. However, I identified these two as the most important stakeholders. First, we have the stakeholder group of young adults, ranging anywhere from 18 to 34. This demographic has one of the largest capacities for empathy. However, they are not as involved in nonprofits or volunteering. The second group of stakeholders that I identified were current HSUS employees. They care about the future of the organization, not only because they care about their job security, but they also care about the longevity of the mission. The first design thinking session that I conducted was a saturating group with 8 young adults ranging between the ages of 24 to 31. Some of them identify as animal advocates, while others consider themselves empathetic to the cause. I asked them 5 questions that I determined beforehand related to issues that they care about, both animal and non-animal related, as well as the platforms that they engaged in. The questions that I asked were, what qualities in people or things inspire you? What are some of the issues in the world that you care about? What ways do you like to learn new things? What type of media do you find yourself interacting with? And finally, if a company or organization were to lose your trust, how might that have happened? A strong majority of the group that participated found that they were very active in social media, whether it was Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat. One person even said that their favorite method of social media is using Bitmoji, which is a type of personalized emojis. It was also nearly unanimous that this group found videos to be one of their preferred methods of media consumption, whether it was streaming on platforms such as Twitch, Facebook Live, or others, as well as posted videos on YouTube. Interestingly enough, this group also identified word of mouth or open dialogue with people to be one of their favorite types of gathering new information. In terms of issues that mattered to this group, to a varying degree, different animal welfare issues came up, whether it was environmental destruction leading to cornerstone species being relocated, to factory farming, to the population of bees. Every single individual in this session had an animal issue that they cared about. Also, every single person in the group expressed that they care about bias towards disenfranchised groups or individuals. In this example, we are mostly looking at humans, although 1 or 2 mentioned bias towards dog breeds or animals based on their role in society. And finally, the destruction of natural resources and the environment came up multiple times. This group of young adults cares very much about where the world is headed, whether it's in terms of the environment and planet or how we are changing as a society. Next, this group of young adults were nearly all motivated by compassion, whether compassion towards other people, other groups, or simply showing compassion to individuals. Next, a large portion identified that resilience and perseverance was a trait that they found very appealing. Many of them identified inclusivity as a characteristic that they wished to see more of in the world. Finally, this group was frustrated by many things. Some of the highlights include disrespect for individuals or groups of people, when companies, organizations, or individuals lack transparency or inauthentic. And finally, diversity was very important to this group. From this design thinking session, I was able to find that for the most part, young adults all partake in passive engagement, such as video, social media, but they can be enticed and receptive to traditional forms of engagement, such as books or lectures. However, multiple of these young adults identified that they were only receptive if it was something that they individually cared about. This group also identified that trust can easily be lost and that it is very hard for them to gain it back. One participant identified that they used to donate to a specific organization that they cared about. However, when they found out that more money was going to CEOs and members of the board instead of directly going to help the cause, they swiftly stopped supporting the organization. This group very much wants to support companies and organizations, or even politicians, that have similar values to them. They are not terribly willing to compromise when it comes to their support. Next, I conducted a 2x2 matrix composite with 6 different young adults between the ages of 22 and 28, where I listed 20 animal issues and asked them to place them along a matrix, ranging from familiar to unfamiliar and sympathetic to unsympathetic. I then compiled all of the data and placed the average position into one final matrix. Overall, many of these young adults were unfamiliar with a lot of the issues, but for the most part were sympathetic towards them. For example, many people were not aware that there is a dog meat trade in the world where dogs are farmed to be used as meat. However, when they recognized that this was a potential issue, they were very sympathetic towards the cause. Next, I found that there was some inconsistency with causes that individuals may care about simply based on the phrasing or the framing. For example, many young adults are familiar with the idea of factory farming, but slightly unsympathetic to it, but we're very familiar and sympathetic to the idea of climate change. These two are intertwined because of the large amount of emissions, water, and natural resources that are used for farming. And finally, participants had a wide range of empathy for different issues, and I found this very fascinating. Some individuals were very sympathetic towards causes that were aligned with what we might call companion animals, like horses, dogs, and cats, while others were very sympathetic towards anything involving wildlife because they personally care about wildlife. Next, I have 2 design thinking sessions that I conducted with current HSUS employees. First, I worked with 12 HSUS staff members to create persona profiles based on potential advocates. These 12 individuals were split up into 4 groups of 3 members and were each given a nearly blank persona profile. They were provided with an image, a name, and some basic demographic information, such as their age, their profession, the city that they live in, and their education background. From there, we conducted a 30-minute exercise and discussion based on filling out these profiles. We all identified originally that ideally this would be done through collecting genuine data instead of information and experience that these individuals have had with people that may fall into this persona. But for the sake of a small team, learning how to empathize with different demographics, the team felt this was a suitable exercise. Teams had to fill out information such as their capacity to give in terms of time, talent, and treasure, personality traits, for example, ranging from is an individual more introverted or extroverted, their preferred channels that HSUS currently uses, goals they have when looking to support a nonprofit, frustrations they have when they look for nonprofits, their familiarity with animal issues, and finally, their motivations and brands that they support. Members of this group were asked to think about their experiences with either donors, supporters, or people they know in their everyday lives that may align with the person that they were given. Staff really enjoyed this exercise and were very receptive to the idea that their experiences are limited and that they should learn and practice empathy towards different people with different backgrounds. Another piece of this is that all staff immediately assumed that each individual was a type of animal advocate, neglecting to realize that not everybody cares about the issues in the same way that they do, and that they might have to realign their positioning and thoughts to reach these individuals. Next, I conducted 5 interviews with current staff members, where I listened to their stories, their inspiration, and how and why they became animal advocates. Simply put, I wanted to seek understanding of what brought them to HSUS and what has kept them there. For all of these staff members, I found that the idea of a story and a narrative was very, very important to them. They each shared with me their story of becoming animal advocate. In every instance, each participant was drawn into the world of animal advocacy through one specific issue. For example, caring about community cats, or sometimes referred to as feral cats, and from there, learning about other animal issues. Each staff member all took pride in their work that they individually did and what the organization does as a whole. All of them recognizing that members of the animal rescue team were just as important as members of human resources. Each staff member had a unique story of what inspired them and had one issue that mattered to them above all else. Some staff members recognized that nuance and education is important when discussing animal issues, because animal issues are a very sensitive one, and nobody wants to be made to feel guilty or be told that they are a bad pet owner or that they are mistreating animals. Some staff recognize that a place for improvement is not focusing on large-scale issues because they can be intimidating to those who don't identify themselves as advocates, and that a nice alternative would be to reach them on a smaller scale and identify places where they can make changes for animals in their day-to-day lives. Through my experience working with young adults, I found that they were easily turned off by pandering and disingenuous companies, organizations, or even people. Young adults also have a lot of empathy towards disenfranchised groups of people. They tend to be open to learning new things, but really only receptive if they have some identified incentive to learn that, and that they admire determination, authenticity, and dedication. HSUS staff members all had unique stories to share, and this is where, in my interviews, they really turned around and started to be more open to discussion. After I asked them about their individual story and maybe asked them about a few instances, after listening to each individual story, they were more open towards sharing stories from their personal or professional lives. It wasn't until after we did the persona profile exercise that they recognized that they have assumptions about their target audiences, and some even expressed that they were going to try each day to improve their empathy and eliminate their biases. One participant even identified that sometimes that they're a little bit too empathetic towards animals and forget that they need the support of other humans. Most staff members recognized that things would need to change for the longevity of the Humane Society of the United States. However, none of them had any idea how that might happen. My observations from these design thinking sessions were both some that I expected and some that I did not expect. After every session, every single participant, whether we were one-on-one in a small group or a large group, wanted to have discussions on other thoughts and ideas they had from the session. After my saturating group with young adults, we sat around for about another 15 to 20 minutes discussing our ideas for social media, different ways we might change the way that we interact with social media, and discussing emerging media markets, such as live streaming like Twitch. In a similar vein, young adults recognized that social media was this quote-unquote necessary evil, but all saw it as sometimes beneficial and sometimes a frustrating burden. In the saturating group with young adults, they were very receptive to each other's answers and often would try to break off and talk about answers even more. HSUS staff members were all open and very excited about sharing their individual stories about how they came into animal advocacy. As humans, we have this really interesting ability to tell stories, and giving people the opportunity to share their own stories is both insightful and empowering for them. One of the more interesting takeaways from my sessions with HSUS staff members was that after the sessions, staff members identified that from time to time, or more than they would like to admit, that they do not empathize with their target audience and simply think about what matters to them. One staff member could even identify a time in the last week that their judgment on a piece was dictated solely because of their own individual experience and not considering the target audience. All of the sessions that I conducted provided valuable information. It confirmed some thoughts that I had before conducting the sessions, but also gave light onto new spaces that I would not have been able to think of on my own. Thank you so much for watching this presentation.